That has been my biggest challenge, is building the local team. And I think that even today, to this date, that is still my biggest challenge. And after doing all the research, talking to EOs of people that have opened offshore, what is the biggest challenge is not being present in that country. So, the perfect wish list, if I could live there for, 2 years or 3 years to kind of start with, then that would be the best scenario. It wasn't an option.
Hi, and welcome to the Entrepreneur Organisation Business Podcast. I am your host, Linh Podetti. My guest today is Karinna Gobbo, a forum member of mine at EO Sydney, who is also the founder of Tappeti, which was started in 2006. Tappeti produces bespoke custom rugs and carpets for commercial and high-end residential applications. Now, she has worked with companies like Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, and more. And in this episode, we're going to deep dive into the reasons why Karinna decided to expand her operations to Singapore and the challenges that she faced trying to run an overseas branch while still living in Australia. Now, what I love about EO and being around entrepreneurs like Karinna is that we can learn from their lessons and to know what to do and not to do when we're faced with the same challenge, such as should we expand our business overseas? Now, please join me in welcoming Karinna. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode. We have Karinna Gobbo here. She's actually a forum member of mine. I'm so lucky to hang out with her a lot. And so, Karinna, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Linh. Thanks for having me.
So, Karinna, I was always so interested in what you do because it's so unique. It's like the carpet right behind you right there. But before I get into, learning more about your business, today we're going to talk about why you decided to expand to Singapore, a place that I love. I'm actually going there soon. First up, let's introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about why you decided to start into this really unique business.
Yeah. Look, I started Tappeti 16 years ago, and Tappeti means rugs in Italian. And people have always thought that I brought a brand in from Europe, but Tappeti is actually my brand. And a lot of people, I guess, with the assumption because of the name having the Italian association, had thought it was a European brand that I had the rights to in Australia. So after setting up Tappeti, I've always had a vision for it to be a global brand, and the actual name, meaning rugs in Italian, is fairly consistent throughout Europe about what the name stands for, and in German it's Tappeti. So people have an understanding about the word and what it actually means globally. And an opportunity came up in 2015. I started Tappeti in 2006 to supply GSK Pharmaceuticals in Singapore. And I love traveling, and I've always wanted to have an international presence. And it was difficult to choose where and how, and there was a number of different factors for that. Singapore came about. I had a head start with a few clients that I'd worked with globally. We were doing some work already globally outside of the Australian entity, but we decided to go, hey, let's set up a company in Singapore as a local entity that we can actually supply, design and deliver beautiful custom rugs in Asia, not just Singapore. And Singapore being the hub for Asia, also for corporations. It has the higher capita of net worth in one of the world from a population perspective. And I saw the opportunities after doing research. So my first trip to Singapore was in 2015. I'd never even gone there, and I set the company up within about 12 months later.
Wow. So 2006 was when you originally started the business, and it was just running in Australia the whole time. How was the operation like? Is it like, do you have a showroom, or is it all an e-commerce business? Yeah, just let us know a little bit of how it was set up.
Yes, so it is a business to business. We predominantly design and manufacture for architects and designers, and that was the business philosophy in 2006. And historically, the design community in general had a lot of players where they used to only supply the designers. So I guess the value of design in 2006 is very different to what it is now. And the whole value of design then was designers got to purchase different products at a different price point. And if you were purchasing products for the home or engaging in a designer, they had, I guess the benefit was making, more money on putting margins onto product. But, fast forward 16 years, it's a very different world with e-commerce. The design service value proposition has changed, and has the business model and Tappeti changed? Absolutely. So we're a team of nearly 15 globally, and we have a new studio in Sydney. We had a small kind of studio in Chippendale before, but we've decided to actually combine our operations and also our studio. We are not retailers. We only work with designers and architects, and we will be offering some of our pieces, unique pieces, online as well in future.
Actually, you were telling me last time you work with so many interesting brands. Are you able to share a few of those brands or exciting projects you recently did?
Yeah, look, we get to do, we really do get to work with the best designers globally. And we just launched a new collection with a firm called YSG. She's a designer based in Australia, but doing incredible work throughout even UAE, Australia, and also other countries. But just to give you an example, 2023 right now, we are just finishing off the Deloitte fit out in Sydney. We've done the new AMP building. We've also done Intercontinental in Perth. We've just done work with Dior. So we've got some really fabulous brands. We also really do high-end residential homes. And a lot of the people we can't even mention, sometimes have to sign NDAs. But they're all really beautiful fit-outs. They're all custom and they're designed. So we actually have a design team in-house and we design everything from scratch. So the piece behind me, for instance, is one of our hand knots that's on the wall, but we actually draw every line by its exact width. So if that's been made at, say, 2 centimetres, we actually document the piece at 2 centimetres. So it's very intricate and very detailed.
That is amazing. Well, let's talk about the challenges of actually expanding to a place like Singapore. So what made you decide, like, you know what, I want to actually have a presence there versus like, you know, you could be here, you could still be exporting, or you maybe just have a rep that runs around. But like, why was it that you decided that you wanted an actual office over there?
Yeah, I think from an expansion point of view, so I'm going through the scaling up process at the moment, and I wasn't then, but I had kind of, I guess, a bigger vision, and we were getting interest from Asia, and we did already have a contract under our belt, which we did through the Australian company. And importing into other countries, if you don't have a local company, is actually quite difficult with taxes, logistics, duties. It's not as a simple process, and it depends on which country that is, but particularly in Asia, it's very different from Singapore to Malaysia to even Indonesia on importation. So that was probably one of the main reasons. If, you know, I'm going to have an actual office based in Singapore, you know, the size of that company should marry Australia. So therefore, we need to be on the ground. Culturally also, I find, you know, when you're expanding in other countries, I don't feel, you know, companies take you seriously if you're from another country and don't have a local entity or a local presence. And it depends on your distribution channels, and it depends also on your business model. But I'm talking about a custom product that designers want to engage in a design conversation where it's hands-on. And I just find, you know, you can't do that always remotely. You know, we're not a service business. So that's the biggest challenge. And I think that's been my biggest challenge from, you know, living in Australia and setting up in Asia.
So did you try to do it first before you actually went there? Like, you're like, all right, let me just try to liaise with those clients over here. And then, you know, and then that's when you felt that it was challenging. You're like, the only way is to actually set the office.
We got the first contract we got, which was quite a considerable one, which is the GSK pharmaceutical fit out in Singapore. It was all done through Australia. I actually hadn't even arrived in or been to Singapore ever. And is that sustainable for a growth model long term? No. Was that manageable in that instance? And I was saying yes, but the circumstances are very different. The clients knew me from Australia. They were expats living in Singapore. They're obviously not locals. So they really understood the product. They really understood how we worked. And what I guess our vision was for the project. So in that essence, if in a beautiful world, if every client was like that, from an expansion point of view, then I'd say yes, absolutely. I wouldn't set up there, but that's not the reality of the local market in Singapore.
Yeah. Okay. So take us back to that time when you decide, all right, I'm gonna set up in Singapore. So what was the first step, and then what did you have to do in order to actually set up?
I kind of went back to my roots when I started Tappeti here in Australia, and I went there with a suitcase with my samples, and I went and presented to X amount of design firms. So I did the market research. I've got a corporate marketing background, so I was very kind of familiar with, I guess, a market and where a product sits from a price point and a positioning. And I actually got there, wheeled around my 30-kilogram sample bag. So I have neck issues, and saw the clients and asked them, you know, like, what do you want in the market? I did market research. And I did that myself. I didn't ask anybody else. And the next challenge was setting up a local entity when you were not a local, when you're a foreigner. and Singapore's government have got, I guess, a lot more restrictive in accessing foreigners setting up local companies. So there's kind of a due diligence process that you must go through, and finding the right partner, like from an accounting point of view. I find in Australia, us being here, it's easy to find an accountant. They're not necessarily the right one, but you can get someone to do those services pretty easy. But to get someone that's offshore that you understand culturally, because their laws are very different, that was a challenge. So I reached out to people I knew. And I'm not good at reaching out asking for help. And I thought, I need help. I need to connect with people in Asia that have already done this. And that's what I did.
So tell me, did you join EO before you launched the Singapore branch, or was it after?
It was about the same time. So I've been EO 7 years this year, and I set up, officially I registered the company in 2016, and I wanted a second baby. And I couldn't have a second child at that time in my life. And I was going through IVF. And I thought, you know what? Singapore's going to be my baby. And there's a photo of me in Singapore with the accountant, who I still have to this day, with my registration certificate of business. And I was 6 weeks pregnant.
Wow.
So when it actually happened, it took me about good 4 or 5 months to set up the entity and get it registered. So you have to also be present there to actually sign legal documents. It's kind of, you can't do things by PDF in 2016. You have to have life signatures, real stamps and things like that. So I had 2 babies. One was born in 2017 and Singapore was born in 2016. That's essentially why I had the time and the energy to kind of put into it. I thought...
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm asking is that were you able to leverage any of the contacts that you maybe have met at EO? Because EO is basically located everywhere. Did you find some members in Singapore?
Actually hadn't at that time, but now fast forward, I have got when I go to Singapore, if I'm there for a week, I could fill up my diary for breakfast, lunch and dinner just to actually see people I've made connections with. And I think because of 2017, I had a newborn, and I only kind of had the business there for a couple of years before the big C word. I hadn't used the connections like I should have in hindsight, but I have since done that. And an example of that is, going on to I used the EO website to find the local connections, but I actually connected with the local chapter first and sent an email saying, hey, I'm in town, I've got a local company, I'd like to connect, with like-minded people, and I've met some fabulous people. So my lesson learned out of that is do it, don't delay, use that material that we have, because I probably could have used that to my advantage much more in 2016 than
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, like it was right there, but you forgot to leverage. Wow.
It was new, I joined on EO in 2016. It was kind of the same time. And obviously there was a lot going on at that time as well in my life. So in hindsight, that's probably why I didn't know it was available. So, the resources to set up offshore in Singapore, any country, is like second to none.
Amazing. Okay, so share with us, how did you start building your team? So, you obviously had people working for you in Australia, but then now that you're in Singapore, I must imagine that clients are saying, yep, all right, yep, I want to give you a go and I want to work with you. Then what did you do in terms of support?
Yeah, that has been my biggest challenge, is building the local team. And I think that even today, to this date, that is still my biggest challenge. And after doing all the research, talking to EOs of people that have opened offshore, what is the biggest challenge is not being present in that country. So, the perfect wish list, if I could live there for, 2 years or 3 years to kind of start with, then that would be the best scenario. It wasn't an option and at the moment. So I hired local people who had the industry experience and to actually develop the clientele and business that way. So it was a great time starting with, pre-COVID. But now, for instance, we've got a local regional manager. We're a part of a furniture brand. We are mixed with their showroom. There is no conflict. We've got great product that we actually service the same clientele, and we're investing a lot in our marketing and also our kind of client activities to the architects and designers. So we've just done the Marriott Hotel over there. We've just done the Park Royal. We've done Facebook. We've done Macquarie Bank. We've got some really great projects under our belt. We do a lot of show houses, which are like our display apartments here in Australia. So it's growing. it hasn't grown to, I guess, the level that it can grow to. And that is one of, I guess, my opportunities and my kind of key KPIs for the next 12 to 18 months is to focus on the Singapore business.
Yeah. I mean, I can just so imagine, because you're a mom with kids and then, you've got your business here. And then, so yeah, how do you actually make sure that you split your time between here and Singapore? How often do you actually go there?
Normally, again, with the big C, threw everything up in the air. And during COVID, Singapore construction stopped, whereas Australia, it didn't. And that's a big difference. Like, projects pretty much stopped. In Australia, it didn't. So normally I go about 4 times a year. But we have committed to a lot of marketing activity this year. So we just had a big launch with a commercial magazine last month. So my sales manager went. I'm going in 2 weeks. We have another event in May with another magazine launch. So my sales manager is going to go to that. So we're going to shift it up a little bit. We've got a new regional manager starting, and we're building the team, and we want to scale fast.
Mm-hmm. So do you find that doing marketing is a very different, it's almost like, do you have to have different campaigns? Like Australia, you're kind of doing it differently. Singapore, you have to really think in a different way, or any differences in the way you operate your business, whether it's marketing or operations in either countries?
One of the biggest lessons I've learned is the value of design, and the value of design in Asia is very different to Australia. Mm-hmm. And we're very forward thinking. We're global textile leaders as such. So kind of collections that we put out, we're normally a good 18, sometimes 3 years ahead of our time. And I can see the cycles of our collections, and when our collections launch and when kind of the activity starts to drive is several months, if not sometimes years. And in Asia, the collections that we are kind of doing in Australia 3 years ago are kind of popular. So almost, I'm not going to say it's behind, but they like to do what has already been done more so. Not all, but, that has been one of the biggest challenges. So from a marketing perspective, we had this conversation in the team is, let's show that new collection we launched last month. I'm like, no, hang on. Actually, no, we haven't kind of, I guess, communicate all our collections to the market in Asia. How about we communicate this collection that's doing really well in this type of market? So absolutely the marketing is different.
So the taste and the design's different, but in a way you get to recycle then. Whatever has worked in Australia can be reused in Singapore. Is that right?
Well, recycle, yeah. Multi-use, but we're still changing because we're custom. We might use an existing base design, for instance, and alter the colours. So it's kind of creating a new design. But yes, and we have our own design collections online. When I first started the business, 90% was custom designed, as in from scratch from the designer's brief, whereas now, 80% of our work would be using our existing designs and then custom, and in 95% our design collection. They kind of want to see it already done and made, and that's what I want to see produced.
Yeah, I think I'm that type of customer, actually. I like to just look because I'm not as creative, and I like to just see what's out there. So you mentioned that you wish that you kind of leverage on the contacts of EO earlier. Was there any other regrets or things you wish you could have done, better looking back?
Not really. I'm pausing because it was probably not an ideal time to start a company pre-COVID in a different country. When you're establishing business in a different country and you can't be physically present and depend on someone who, has only been in the business a short time over there wasn't ideal. So I don't feel I could change anything from that perspective. There's been numerous cultural barriers which I expected. I don't see any new, but in Australia we kind of have a time frame of employees. To stay 3 to 4 years in a company is quite normal. In Asia, they're saying 18 months, and that's a lot of churn.
Wow.
That kind of we've got a training online, training program, but that's a lot of churn for a salesperson, to learn the content, build relationships, develop a brand. It's quite difficult. That has been probably one of the biggest challenges. And I think part of me says, well, if that's the norm, we're not normal, we're bespoke. I don't want the norm, so let's look for something. Yeah. And I've gone through this in the last couple of months, but then realistically, if that's the way their culture is, and we have to accept that, then it changes in my mindset on investing in someone's future and their growth, which kind of goes against our values and culture as an organisation. And I feel that's one of the big challenges. I'm always about mentoring and training team and keeping them. I'm not saying everyone's like that, but there's a consistent pattern, and it changes your way of thinking on how then do you motivate and retain employees when that is what they do, like that, $500 a month.
Interesting.
Hey, I'll give you that 500. It's not about that. It's just a very different dynamic.
Yeah. Do you think that if you were lucky enough to have a really good business partner that lived in Singapore, that knows the culture, and would it make a difference in growing the business or retaining staff?
I think so. So the team, like my manager there is set to be a partner. Like it's always been, hey, I want a partner. You're not an employee, it's a partner. You have the opportunity to have share of the entire company here. So it's always been communicated that from day one, but they aren't, a lot of people don't think that way. Like we speak that way and I act that way, but I don't kind of feel they're not brought up like that.
Okay. Any regret in expansion and any future plans for further expansion in other countries at all?
I'd never say never. But there's a lot of things, a lot of opportunities that we can do already. And as I mentioned, we're scaling up. We have a coach. So there's a lot of opportunities in Asia, and there's a lot of also opportunities in Australia. But if someone knocked on my door tomorrow and said, hey, there's an opportunity here in wherever, would I say no? Absolutely not. Is it on the near horizon the next 12 months? No, because there's massive growth opportunity for us, not just in Singapore, in Asia, and we're talking all the surrounding Asian countries. So that is, a huge ocean that we are kind of only floating on top of.
Yeah. Well, I know you very well in a sense where I hang out with you. I know you're so energetic, you're motivated. It's like, what keeps that energy? Like, why are you so motivated and not like, I'm getting older, I just want to stay at home and go shopping and eating or something. You're just so motivated in business. What's the secret there?
I think I love learning, and, I'll always get older. I'll never want to always stay at home. As a person, obviously you get older and you evolve and you change. I'm passionate about lots of things in life, and I'm passionate in life. And I think I'm very grateful, to be here today, to be able to have these opportunities. And I think the world is such a huge place, and to stay put and not learn. And I think that's what EO has done for me in the years. I cannot imagine not learning, and even going to an EO event this week. And I got 3 nuggets out of listening, to Toby Pierce. And my mind always ticks, and I am always, it's naturally in my instinct is to strive for more, learn more, grow more. It doesn't mean, I don't want, $100 million company. I don't want that. I want a nice balance, and I want a nice life, and I want to be available for my children. I want to be present. But saying that has what has restricted partially my growth in Singapore is because I do have children and my family priority, and it's always that challenge. What little pieces gives up, or what do you do, and what's going to be what are you going to compromise on, and what are those priorities? But yeah, gosh, if I don't have any passion, Lynn, I'll be on the floor. 6 minutes.
I can't imagine you doing nothing, so that's for sure. But yeah, I can resonate well with you. And so this leads me to the last question, which I love to ask the audience is, ultimately, what do you want the world to remember you for?
And you think about, I was in the office this morning, someone was talking about the funeral on our cultural differences in our office. And Indians, one of the girls is Indian, wears beautiful bright colours, and I wear a lot of black to work. And we go to funerals in Australia and wear black, but in India you wear white, and in other countries. And we started talking about our death today. So it's funny you asked that. And I thought, wow, how would I like to be remembered? And I think it is passionate, lived life to the fullest, lived a beautiful life that was happy. But more importantly, my children have grown up as adults, healthy and living their best lives. They're living their best lives. I just feel mental health is such a big thing in 2023. If you can get through life and manage your mental, physical and sociological well-being, there's nothing more to be grateful for.
Totally. Well, thank you so much, Karinna. I really enjoyed talking to you today. I will make sure all your contact details and your websites, etc., will be in the description of YouTube. So yeah, thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you.
Take care.